Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Sunday morning, welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. A political action group wants Democrats and independents to vote in the Republican primary. Recenter Indiana is putting up billboard ads all over the state, including one here in Indianapolis. This one is in Maryville. Our Garrett Berquist asked the group's leader why they're doing this and if they're backing one candidate in particular.
With us now is Don Kniebel, the president of Recenter Indiana, Inc. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you very much.
So tell us about Recenter Indiana.
Recenter Indiana is a group of two organizations. One's a not-for-profit corporation, one's a political action committee, formed a couple of years ago to help bring Indiana politics closer to the center, which is where we believe most Hoosiers really are.
Who's funding you?
Well, we're funded by people who believe in our cause. We have various people around the state who believe in our cause, and we're funded by people who think that Recenter is a good idea. We have Republicans funding us, Democrats funding us, independents funding us, people who think that Indiana needs to be back to the center.
So you say you want to pull Indiana politics back to the center. Was there any one particular event that catalyzed this?
I think we've just seen over time our politics becoming more and more polarized, people moving to extreme positions. We think about 60% of the state are not extreme in either direction, and we're trying to reach that 60% that we think represents Indiana voters.
So you now have an ad campaign encouraging Democrats, among others, to vote in the Republican gubernatorial primary. Tell me about that.
In Indiana, recently, whoever wins the Republican primary for governor wins the election in November. And yet only a very small number of Hoosiers actually vote in the primaries. In the 2020 primary, only about 15% of all Hoosiers voted in the primary, 24% or so of registered voters, but only about 15% of all Hoosiers. We think that's a mistake. We think more people should vote in the primary, which is where the vote really matters. So we're encouraging people, Democrats, independents, more Republicans, to vote in the primary because that's the vote that's really going to count.
Is there any candidate in particular you want them to vote for? And I noticed on your website you have a space for a gubernatorial endorsement.
As of right now, we have not made any endorsements. We have a separate group of people. Our political action committee is considering that possibility. We've been encouraged to do that. Some people say, you want me to go to the primary and vote? Who should I vote for? We hope people will do their own research. They'll figure out which of these candidates represent their values. And we may, in fact, at some point make an endorsement, but that decision has not been made.
Why focus so much on the Republican primary for governor?
Well, first of all, the Democratic candidate is running unopposed, and so there's no need for anybody to go and vote in the Democratic primary to pick the Democratic gubernatorial candidate. That person has already been determined. The Republican primary has 6 people running for Republican governor, running for governor as Republicans. It will take a very small number of people to move that in one direction or the other, and we think people should go and vote, make their vote count in the primary, because that's ultimately, in most cases, going to determine the outcome of the election come November.
Right now you're running billboard ads and social media ads. Do you plan anything more expensive than that?
Well, as of right now, we have billboards running around the state. We do have a social media campaign. We're getting a lot of interviews, obviously, about this because it's something unusual people want to know about. We will have some op-eds running, we think, but for now, word of mouth is going to be important to us. People looking at our billboards is going to be important. We just hope many more people than voted 2020 come out in the primary this year and make a difference. That's what we hope will happen.
How effective do you think this is going to be?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Billboards, we have hundreds of thousands of people are going to see those billboards over the next, until the primary on May the 7th. People can start voting now, actually, but we don't know. I mean, this has not been done before. We're pioneers on this, and so if we get more people to come out and vote in the primary, we'll think it's been a success.
If a more moderate Republican gets the nomination and as a result of cross-party appeal handily defeats the Democrat in November, does that potentially defeat your group's purpose, particularly if that Republican subsequently tacks back to the right?
Well, obviously, we'd hope that the candidate doesn't tack back in any direction. We hope the candidate that the voters elect stays true to those values. We're simply trying to make sure that Indiana politics represents the people of Indiana. And so one of the ways of doing that is to make sure that the Republican candidate represents the values of Indiana voters. And once that Republican candidate has been selected, if he or she is a moderate, the voters then can determine in November whether the Democrat or Republican should win. But we hope both of those candidates come November will represent the values of Hoosiers.
What if this encourages more conservative voters to come out and vote for a more conservative candidate in an effort to head off what they might perceive as an astroturfing campaign by Democrats?
Well, first of all, this is not a Democrat campaign. Recenter Indiana is bipartisan. We have board members of Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. This is not any effort to elect anyone in particular, any party in particular. We just want to make sure that the candidates that the parties put forth in the primary, after the primary, are the candidates who reflect the values of 60% of Hoosiers.
Generally speaking, more moderate voters don't vote in primaries at all, either Democratic or Republican. What's your confidence you'll be able to pull this off?
Well, that of course is the problem. The primary voter tends to be a more partisan, more committed partisan. And so that's why we see candidates moving toward the extremes in the primary season. We want to make sure that people understand that that's not necessarily a good strategy. If more moderates come out to vote, people have to become more moderate in the primaries as well as the general election. I don't know if moderates will come out to vote. Nobody's really tried to get them to vote before. We're trying to do something that's not been done before, at least not done in Indiana before. So if the moderates come out and vote, we've certainly succeeded. If they don't come out and vote, well, we have not succeeded. But you don't succeed in anything if you don't try it. So we're putting money where we think it will make a difference: social media, billboards, word of mouth, interviews like this one, hoping that people understand that the moderate Hoosiers, which we think represent 60% of all Hoosiers, ought to show up and make a difference in the primary election.
Don Kniebel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Garrett.
Good conversation there. Coming up, we hear from a congressional candidate who joined the race after he lost his son to fentanyl poisoning. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. 2 years ago, Jamison Carrier's son died from fentanyl poisoning. Now the Greenwood businessman says he wants to keep other families from suffering the same fate. He's running for the seat being vacated by Congressman Greg Pence. He talked to our Garrett Berquist.
And joining us now is Jamison Carrier. Jamison, thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely, Garrett. Thank you for having me.
So why are you running for Congress?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm running because I love our country, and I don't feel like the path we're on is going to help us pass off the American dream to the next generation. And I believe that we need to send business leaders to DC who are willing to make the tough decisions to get our budget balanced. And you know, as we travel throughout the district, we see that there are two issues that come up again and again. One is the economy, and I think we're making decisions that have created a lot of the issues that we have with inflation, and we need to correct it. The other issue that we hear again and again is the border. And you know, there are politicians that go down to the border and you know, it's a talking point. They use it as a photo op. Unfortunately, my family doesn't need to do that. We've been personally impacted by the border. My wife and I lost our son, Joey, April 15th of 2022 to fentanyl poisoning. And this is an attack from the Chinese that's coming across our border, and it's now the #1 cause of death for those kids from 18 to 45. And it's happened to way too many families. All of us are impacted by it in some way. We don't want another family to have to go through what we've been through.
Tell me a little bit more about how your background has prepared you for this role.
Yeah, so for me, again, the thing that we keep hearing from people across the district is that they want to send business leaders. You know, we're spending money like it's monopoly money, and it's just not sustainable. We don't have a revenue problem with the U.S. government. We have a spending problem. We need to send people to D.C. that have ran a successful business, that know how to make the tough decisions, and I believe that that's what my background has situated me perfectly for. I don't think our founders ever imagined that we'd have career politicians. I don't think that was even in their minds, and so now we do. We've got that. We've got these career politicians, and I think they're making decisions to get reelected instead of making decisions that are best for our country, both today and the future of our country.
So let's talk about the border for a little bit. As you mentioned, you said border security is one of your top priorities. What should that entail?
Well, look, one of the things that really worked, when President Trump was in office, the border crossings were the lowest they'd been in nearly 45 years. So there are different policies that he had in place that helped to ensure that. One of them was the Remain in Mexico. You know, right now, what we're doing is we're allowing people to come across, and then we set a court date for them and we let them just, you know, stay in our country. Well, that doesn't discourage anyone from coming here. And so that's one of the first things I think we have to put in place is the Remain in Mexico policy worked. We need to use it, and we need to secure our border. There's no reason we should let people just come into this country as if there is no border.
You mentioned the son that you lost to fentanyl poisoning. What are some things on the addiction treatment front that you think Congress should be doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Garrett. I don't know that it's Congress's responsibility necessarily to deal with the addiction treatment itself. I think the larger issue is the fentanyl poisoning that we have. That's something that we've got to fix right now. There's a difference between addiction to whatever drug that it may be and fentanyl. Most of the people that have died from fentanyl poisoning had no idea that they were getting fentanyl. They may have thought it was, you know, some pill, it could be marijuana, it could be any drug, and they end up with fentanyl. And that's the danger, and that's what's coming from China. And again, it's killing now over 300 per day. It's completely out of control. We need to stop the fentanyl, and that's the greatest issue right now that we have to address.
A lot of Republican candidates that I've interviewed this cycle have split on whether Congress should enact a nationwide abortion ban or if the matter should be left up to the states. Former President Donald Trump just said that he would prefer to leave it up to the states. Where do you fall on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I am pro-life, I'm for life, and we're also for mothers. I think both are just a vital part of who we are, right? We need both. And I believe that Roe v. Wade, you know, sent that decision back to the states. However, I'm always going to be for life, and I'm going to be for anything that helps to encourage life.
So, just to be clear, would you support a nationwide abortion ban, or would you prefer to leave that to the states?
I would support anything that would be a step in the right direction for life.
You've worked for a couple of nonprofits that work on hunger relief. If you were elected to Congress, what could we expect from you on that front?
Yeah, I think hunger relief is very important, and I don't know, you know, some of our stuff has been both locally and then internationally as well. And we have, you know, Hungry Hoosiers across the state, and that's something that's very important to me. We've always partnered with nonprofits a lot because I believe that those of us that are fortunate need to help those that are less fortunate. There are times that the government can get involved, and that's wonderful. We also need to come together, I believe, as Americans, as Hoosiers, and help each other out through nonprofits like the Million Meal Movement. We also partner with Convoy of Hope, who work both with, you know, inner city and rural initiatives. They also work internationally. And so all of these are great programs that we can be a part of and help people that are less fortunate than us.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team discusses that ad campaign from Recenter Indiana and the latest push on student loan debt. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Ariel Brandy and Republican Whitley Yates. Good to see you both. Let's begin now with that Recenter Indiana campaign that we heard about at the top of the show. Whitley, given the numbers that we've seen so far in the Republican primary, do you see this tipping the results one way or another?
I'm not necessarily sure what the strategy is going to do. I don't believe it's going to be too effective in tipping the numbers either way.
I mean, it's certainly interesting, Ariel. So what do you make of the group's assertion that the Republican primary is the only vote that really matters? And could this spell trouble for Democrats?
I don't think that people are really going to buy into this. I mean, at the end of the day, voter turnout in this state has been so low. The biggest focus that I think Hoosiers are looking at is being able to pick the candidate that they feel best represents them. And I don't really know that this campaign is going to be one that gets Democrats to go to the other side. If anything, I see it as a distraction right now. And I really think voters just need to focus on, like I said, picking the candidate that best serves them and represents their values in our state.
Yeah, we'll see if it works, how it plays out, and if they plan on doing anything for the primary. We'll wait and see on that one. Let's move to national politics now. The Biden administration has floated a new student loan debt forgiveness plan. Ariel, we'll start with you here. Republicans say this isn't fair to people who worked through college and paid off their debt. or for people who chose not to go to college. Do you think they have a point?
I think that this was one of the biggest draws to the Biden administration and to their campaign, especially when it came to young people and people of color who were looking for somebody who could speak to their values and also help eliminate that debt. We were sold on the American dream of you go to college, you earn a good job afterwards. And a lot of us, unfortunately, have fallen into so much debt with that. This specific student loan debt relief that the Biden administration is putting in place is going to help so many more Hoosiers in our state. Specifically, they've already dumped in $2.7 billion of approved debt loan forgiveness here in Indiana specifically. Looking forward to more Hoosiers being added to the next 30 million voters in our country that are going to be able to have that debt relieved and removed from their records. It's going to be great for them to be able to have that fresh start.
Whitley, I'll let you respond, but also, the Biden administration says they have the authority for this plan under the Higher Education Act. Do you agree with that?
Listen, have you noticed every time around election season, the Biden administration starts giving stuff out? If you remember the last time when we had midterms, all of a sudden you could go online and write your name down on the Department of Ed website for loan forgiveness, and then people didn't hear anything because it was unconstitutional. Do we remember when that happened? Every single time that we are about to go and vote, it's almost as if this administration is attempting to give people something to vote for. I'm not going to say he's buying our vote, but honestly, is this the policy that is going to be able to pass and withhold and withstand? I'm not sure, because it doesn't really attack the root cause, which is that cost of education has inflated over 60%. And we haven't really addressed the fact that educational institutions are really kind of squeezing these incoming students with increasing their tuition rates in order to get those federal dollars. And that is the problem that's not being fixed.
Ariel, does Whitley have a point there?
She does. There is an underlying root cause that we can definitely agree upon. But I think that having a presidency that can at least come up with some type of alternative plan after this was shut down by the Supreme Court is something that we need to at least try to get behind. This type of debt relief could change the lives of so many, not only Hoosiers, but people in this country, to be able to finally own a home, to be able to afford to be able to pay for things now because they don't have that lingering student loan debt. This is something that I know for not only just young people, but people who have been paying towards this for a long time. They're really looking forward for a plan to be able to feel some type of relief. And I'm just happy that this administration has at least made it a priority and will continue to make it a priority.
I think it'd be better if our economy was at its peak and doing so well that people that graduated with degrees got great paying jobs and were able to pay back their loans that they took out on their own.
Yeah, that certainly would help. We had two major developments in the abortion fight this past week, ladies. First, former President Donald Trump said individual states should decide their abortion laws. Then Arizona's Supreme Court reactivated an 1864 abortion ban in that state. I want to get your reaction to both from both of you. I have about a minute to go, so we'll start with you here, Ariel.
Yeah, this is so unfortunate. I mean, for this type of ban to be put in place before a state even existed, I mean, we have to be looking at the history behind all of this. But I also think, too, like, at what point in time are we going to stay out of the doctor's office when it comes to women being able to make their own choices in this? I mean, reproductive freedom in this country and in this state is one of the top issues still that people are caring about. And we need to be able to figure out how we can get behind all of these women who are calling attention to this being something that they no longer want to see.
Whitley, 30 seconds, close us out.
You know, Indiana is going to be focusing on supporting mothers, supporting babies, and the sanctity of life, and ensuring that they have the resources necessary to stay healthy and thriving in the state of Indiana.
Good conversation, ladies. Always good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be right back.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30, and be sure to tune in at 11 o'clock for the Hill Sunday with Chris Steyerwalt. Have a great rest of your weekend.